ceremony is so important. So we need to feel nature once again. We need to feel the empathy of that tree's pain is my pain. I need to feel that I am nature. It's not a thought process. It's an embodied process.
And honouring the ancestors of your own blood, honouring the ancestors of place, learning about these trees and their lore, those plants over there, the taste of that one, why you can't eat that one, the minerals beneath your feet, the stars above, and all the stories of one's native culture give us a great sense of belonging, great sense of identity, great sense of place, and that gives us a sense of well-being, combined with the ritual and the great food that one might cook.
When you feel you belong to something, you want to take care of it.
Hello and welcome to the last episode of this series. It's been epic, a series of 52 episodes, and we are now going to be taking a deep break until the autumn. It feels like a very long time ago when we made the first episode of this series, which was one that had different voices from those of you that are part of this community, sharing your insights from the first lockdown on what we thought was going to be a much shorter experience of the pandemic. Every week we have felt called to offer in new episodes as there is so much wisdom and connection that it feels important to share at these times. We also really take our breaks seriously because they are such important time for recharging and getting new perspective and being able to focus on reflection and seeing things in a different way and the healing that comes from rest, as well as being able to spend time with our friends and families and not have so much input and the sharing outwards. So I hope that you are all getting some time to rest as well as we travel through the rest of this pandemic. Last week, we realized that it was the 50th episode that our writer and visual director of our social channels, Annegret Folderbach, had been with us on this show. I want to say a huge thank you to Annegret, who has brought so much creativity, ease, and beauty to the team. And of course, a thank you to our wonderful sound editor, Mary Chan, who has been with the show for around 3 years now. We are all on this journey of learning and unlearning together. And it's been such a fantastic year of working in this team that is spread between the UK, Canada, and South Africa. A space where we can collaborate and support each other through this incredible work. For me, personally, this series has been strong. This year has been quite a deep experience. Next week is a year since the death of my father. And as we all start to understand the ways the pandemic has changed us, I am looking forward to this quiet time to rest, be still, reflect, and stand back and focus on my own in-breath and what might land in this time out. We will be back in September or October, and although we won't be on air with new conversations, there will be live events and activities happening through the community. This will include our gathering, which will be like a mini restival, and the launch of our community app so you can connect more with each other. If you want to know more about all of this and stay connected, make sure you are on our newsletter list or a patron or member of Presence Collective. You can find out more about all of this if you go to our website and click on Community and Support. Speaking of live and in-person events, this is a special episode of a discussion that was recorded after our recent Avebury pilgrimage, panel and dinner that we hosted in collaboration with Noisily Festival. A huge thank you to Helly Cameron and Flo Audley Cannon, who I organised this with, and to Charles Audley Cannon, who along with Flo hosted us for the panel and dinner and took care of the tech setup on the day. And of course, a thank you to our pilgrims who were there on the day and those who cooked for us, who made this a beautiful co-created experience. The theme of this conversation was inspired by the theme of what was to be Noisily's Mind, Body, Soul area. Of course, the festival has been postponed now till 2022. Here are some words written by Mind, Body, Soul about the theme, We Are Nature. The lives of every living organism on Earth are magically interwoven, delicate, energetic threads knitting our ecosystem together into a planetary, intelligent superorganism. When we look deep enough within ourselves, the understanding of this truth is inherent to our very being. However, destructive patterns of behavior stemming from separatism and duality, ego and greed are threatening this fragile living network. Now more than ever before, it is time to activate from within, opening ourselves to the innate wisdoms that surround us, to receive, feel, and manifest this intelligence as our own networks become alive with resonating vibrations, soft healing power growing from the roots up as nature intended, a new narrative we can all be part of. We invite you to reconnect with this ancient wisdom, to celebrate the interconnection of all living beings and our planet's beauty and abundance, to recognize the importance of rerouting, grounding, and opening ourselves to the frequencies, intelligence, and infinite potential of life, to mindfully heal, regenerate, and transform our living story. In this live episode, I share a conversation with Charlotte Pulver from episode 124, a modern-day alchemist, Chris Park from episode 141, an active member of the order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, a prolific beekeeper, enthusiastic storyteller, and folklore wisdom keeper, Jimena Paratcha from episode 140, mother, community leader, conscious entrepreneur, and horsewoman with 20 years of working in the social justice sector. And Bruce Parry from episode 5, explorer, documentary filmmaker, author, and indigenous rights supporter. We were meant to be joined by Ada Paris from episode 38, futurist, cultural strategist, systems designer, and artist, but sadly, she couldn't be with us on the day. You can listen to each of these wonderful humans share more of their wisdom in their in-depth episodes on this podcast. One thing that feels important to mention is trauma, as this comes up in the conversation. The question of if people even have trauma. Something that was quite interesting that Charlotte shared with me after the panel, which got me thinking, is that mental health issues are totally exacerbated in this pandemic, and also with other issues that are really coming up of this time around inequality and to do with our lifestyles and the way in which our addictions are being fed. She was sharing with me that if you look at the government's response to the pandemic here in the UK and in other places around the world, you can see it's coming from a trauma response. There's been some very interesting studies that I've seen around the trauma, for example, that people who go to boarding school experience. And if you weren't aware, most of our politicians in the UK went to boarding school and have some of this really deep trauma. And of course, there's so many other ways that our separation, and especially our separation from nature, plays out in some of the most destructive and really quite ridiculous ways in which our society is formed. Dr. Gabor Mate has shared something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, that COVID has revealed the trauma and the depths of trauma in our culture and society. Arundhati Roy has talked about it being like a CT scan showing us our problems and dysfunctions and how they differ in each country, or something to that effect. Maybe you've noticed it in yourself with your addictions, especially some of the socially acceptable ones, such as screen time, box sets, sugar, alcohol, overeating, etc. Maybe you've also noticed some other habits form during this time, where you've been taking more walks or taking things more slowly, or being more conscientious about how you use your time and how you look after yourself as an appropriate non-trauma related response in an event such as a global pandemic would be to really take good care of our health and each other, and make sure that we are doing really simple things such as eating well and taking various supplements and medicines that are available to us that can provide us with more nutrition, educating each other on how we can do this in ways that are free, such as foraging, and making sure that we look after those in our community that are more vulnerable, that we really pay attention not just to our physical health, but to our mental and emotional well-being during these times. I was watching the recent documentary that Dr. Gabor Mate is featured in called The Wisdom of Trauma. It's really important viewing, as trauma is the disconnection from which so much of that which separates us from nature comes from. And it's important to remember that some of this trauma is personal, like it might be to do with your childhood and things that have happened in your life. A lot of it is ancestral and it goes up through the bloodlines. We have to remember that we're not very far away from colonization and other violences that have really created the dominant system that we have in this world. And of course, we know that there is all kinds of neo-colonization and modern day slavery and such like happening today. SAND, which is the Science and Non-Duality community who shared this documentary, they say, trauma is the invisible force that shapes our lives. It shapes the way we live, the way we love, and the way we make sense of the world. It is the root of our deepest wounds. Dr. Mate gives us a new vision, a trauma-informed society in which parents, teachers, physicians, policymakers, and legal personnel are not concerned with fixing behaviors, making diagnosis, suppressing symptoms, and judging, but seek instead to understand the sources from which troubling behaviors and diseases spring in the wounded human soul. That's so powerful. And before we go into this conversation, I just want to also give a huge thank you to you, whether this is the first episode that you're joining us for, and maybe you will go back now into the almost 150 episodes that we have made over the years. And if you've been with us for a while, listening to lots of episodes and being active and sharing and being part of our community and connecting, I just want to say a huge thank you, because this is really made with you. I am very grateful for the heart space that it has created and the space of inquiring with complexity and non-attachment to certainty, opening up these ways of deep listening and the decolonizing of wisdom and information and the ways in which we can grow. I look forward to what might unfold when we come back together. And so on to this conversation today, where we explore the theme of We Are Nature in this episode called Transforming Our Living Story, where we speak to the question, how do we harmonize the complexities of being human whilst honoring ourselves as beautiful beings of nature? We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that it connects you deeper to your true nature. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is The Revolution, Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and for coming and sharing this magnificent Midsummer's Day with us all. We wanted there to be a part of this day where we came together to really share like what's happened here in this act of pilgrimage and to explore the theme, We Are Nature. And this is the theme that Helly and Flo chose for Mind, Body, Soul for the area of Noisily. And so that's where we're going to be starting from. And before we get deeper into that, I would love for Chris and Charlotte to share a little bit about why we go on pilgrimages and how that connects us to nature and to our nature.
So I think the word holiday comes from the word holy day. And life is full, isn't it? Life and work and family and responsibilities and house and garden and growing and livestock and pets and all those things. And so pilgrimages, they afford us spacious places where we can step out of all of that into a more meaningful, spiritual, liminal space where magic happens and we can be inspired, we can marvel at the world, and we can be open to transformation. And there's generally a destination. A pilgrimage often has a destination. And of course it's walking. And it's one of the three medicines of the world, as the old Welsh physicians tell us. There are three medicines of the world: water, honey, and labour. And so that's just that repetitive trance-like walking that we've all been doing today, getting our bodies moving and going to a place and receiving guidance and just moments and conversation with fellow pilgrims, bird song. Just things start to drop away from us. Things start to shed, like we shed a skin when we're on a pilgrimage. And we get this is a horrible term called like nature deficit disorder. You might have heard of it. It happens to inner city kids who are even like allergic to very simple soil bacteria because they've never come into contact with it. But we get saturated with this. We get this nature saturation. And we are nature, aren't we? So we reconnect, and we yearn for that in a highly mechanized world that we have now. I guess most of us were born under clinical lights, and so I think a part of all of us yearns for that simple connection to natural rhythms, to the pace of walking, to the heartbeat, to the these long summer days, tasting and foraging along the way. And then something happens and we might reach that destination and we might make a prayer, or we might receive a blessing, or we might, whatever it might be, we might have some cultural interest because it's a place of where somebody said a great thing or some holy person was born or so we enter into sacred space, whether it's a sacred space that's inherent in the landscape like a spring or a mountain or a cave, or whether it's a sacred space that's come from human interaction, whether an oracle was made or whatever. But we go to these places, something happens, hopefully we're a bit changed, and then we come back and we enter back into the home, back into the everyday, the stresses and strains of life, a bit recharged, and a bit sort of restored and well walked, feeling strong. Well, why else would you need to go on a pilgrimage? I'm sure there are many other reasons.
So pilgrimage for me, I feel like it's prayer in motion. We're walking in prayer, embodied prayer on the land. And in this world we're brought up into, it's this whole thing about what can I gain? from an experience. But with pilgrimage, it's an experience of letting go and surrendering. All you need to know is where you start and where you end. And the trackway itself is a vessel for you to traverse along. So it's like the trackway holds you in your journey, and some really magical things might show up, or you might have amazing experiences. And you're traveling along a physical trackway, but that pathway can clear your inner trackway, clear your inner pathways. Whatever you feel stuck with, you can set out on your pilgrimage with an intention of I just want to shed this shit by the end, or I need some guidance on something which is bothering me, or and that physical pathway can unblock you. So it can be very magical and very simple as well. And the physical vessel of the trackway just holding you, it's like a beautiful sacred container, but so simple. So simple. And all our ancestors have been doing this for so long, these sacred walks across the landscape amongst ancient trackways, which have been made by our hunter-gatherer ancestors following the reindeer through the boreal forests. So we're treading on ancient trackways, but right now, and weaving pathways for the future.
Thank you. And just to presence where we are, and many of us have been on this pilgrimage together today, I would like to invite everyone to close your eyes and to sit up nice and tall, place your feet firmly on the earth, or if you're sitting on the ground, feeling that connection into the earth and feeling the presence of the golden sun above our heads, the last of this beautifully sunny day. Welcoming in the sounds of the birds and the children, the future generations, and nature herself. And bringing your awareness into the space of your heart. Allow your breath to deepen and lengthen. As we take this sacred pause and honoring of all that we have received and shared on these trackways, a moment to recognize what has been left behind, what has shedded, and what may be blossoming or seeding in that space. Taking a few breaths here of gratitude for yourself for choosing to spend this day in this way. To the earth, the rocks, the mystery of Avebury, the waters. To the fire of the sun, the sweet caress of the air, and the ether that has been with us today, and it is with us now. And a moment of gratitude for this community, for being able to walk with others, to share in this beauty. And as you're ready, you can gently open your eyes back into this space, perhaps feeling it different to just a few moments ago. And now as we explore this question, we are nature, and what it means to be nature, I'm going to invite Jimena to share. And maybe you can also share something around today and why coming today was important to you, and maybe something that you have received or that has opened up in this space that we've shared.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Jimena Paratcha. I was made in Argentina and born in San Francisco, California, and chose Brazil as my home until I was here to England. And I've been here 25 years. Today actually felt like such a routine after all that time, but there have been many steps in that time, but it really felt a deepening of my presence here at a time that I thought I'd be going back to Brazil to continue making my life there. So I'm very, very grateful for all of the gifts that came in such a serendipitous and just such a sweet, poetic way. Yeah, with We Are Nature, I just wanted to give thanks to Amisha for inviting me on this panel, and also the Future is Beautiful podcast, because it brought me to really ponder on what that means to me, and to remember who I am in my deepest, deepest place, and the part I am of what is this very humongous organism that we're all part of, but seem to remove ourselves and distance ourselves from, naming nature as something that we visit or something that we observe, and forgetting that we are very much this. And when I was connecting to doing this, I did some meditations. I could literally feel like shells of lizard egg that I'm part of, or fox fur, or the bellowing of whales, and just thought, goodness, what we are and the power of who we are. And I was really taken by surprise today during the pilgrimage and the chalk way, that path, that we were invited to let go of things. I guess in my mind, it was the things that weren't serving me, or things I was ready to leave behind. And as we climbed to the Long Barrow, yes, the Kennet tomb womb, there was a lot of joy in the air. The birds, extraordinary sound. I mean, they were really just phenomenal. I thought it was someone with a whistle at one point. I thought I couldn't see the birds. I could only hear them. And so I didn't know if it was really, that was where it was coming from. And when we were invited into the tomb womb, I stood outside the highest stone there and just put my hands on it to connect, and immediately felt like we were recognizing each other. So I put my forehead on it, and came straight away the Ho'oponopono prayer. Is that how you say it, that prayer? I mean, it's straight away, I haven't thought of this prayer for a long time, and it is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. So I was quite surprised. And I thought, of course, first thing I can do is to apologize for any of my missteps, and those of us as a collective human species. It came naturally. It's such a beautiful practice. If you're not familiar with it, to look it up. There's a current around the earth. There are many currents of people that are doing this work. When I went into the tomb womb, I was blessed to have a moment to myself and made some prayers of gratitude, and also of dream wishes. And I heard very clearly, as I was asking for more clarity and stability in my life and a flow of abundance to share, It was very, very clear messaging, which I questioned whether to share because it's very sacred, but we're here to hold this divine presence together. And it was very clear. It said, be steady and keep true. Be steady and keep true. So, yeah, it was very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for everything you held today. Thank you, Amisha, for this beautiful space you created. To pass on.
And then on to Bruce, whatever you'd like to share from today and around this theme, We Are Nature, and also inviting our friends that are not present with us here that will be part of this conversation with a little taste of the honey and something that they can move with in their own way.
I haven't been on pilgrimage for a while, and it felt really beautiful to slow down and to be in the company of people who can hold us and invite us to consider things in that way. And I thoroughly enjoyed it and definitely got something beautiful from it. And I spent a fair bit of time pondering this question, we are nature, while we were together, and really enjoyed the ritual and the ceremony and the stories, and reflected through them on some of my own experiences. And I guess maybe what it is that I have to offer is the privilege of my own existence, having lived with people around the world who also have ceremony, many of them, many different types of ceremony, which have very similar aspirations of reconnection. But also living with people who don't have much ceremony because they are truly embodying being nature. And when you think of what it is to be nature, it's like, well, we have these words and what's natural and what's unnatural. And there's a fair bit of what we do in our life that you would suggest isn't nature, it's unnatural. And yet there's people that I've had the privilege of being with where I think there isn't anything in their entire day that they do, or their life even, that one consider unnatural. It's almost every aspect of their being is in the flow of that which is nature. And that's an extraordinary thing to have touched upon, and I feel a great privilege in having met and spent time with those people. There's one group in particular that I've been thinking of today, the Panan, who featured in the last film I made, and it gives you an indication of what I mean by they are nature, is that at the moment they live in Borneo, Malaysian-controlled Borneo, and all of the other indigenous groups of that part of the world have put in claims to have their land demarked and for it to be indigenous reserve, because they're all people like many of the other tribes around the world who have made an imprint on the world, whereas the Panan people are unable to prove that they've even been living where they have, because there is no imprint in their way of being. That's what I mean when I say I've met people who are nature. They cannot even prove that they've been there, even though they have songs and myths and stories and people buried, and they've been there longer than anybody else by tens of thousands of years, and they cannot prove it, and therefore can't have their own land tenure. So what is it to be nature? And what's changed? They don't have a word unnatural. We do. What has been that transition from that time, which was probably the vast majority of our time as a species on this planet when we were nature, to this period now where we've created words and we clearly have this separation. And I was debating something similar to this with a friend recently. He said, well, anything that humans do is by default has to be the definition of what's natural and what's unnatural. And I'm like, that can't fit, because then my friends in the forest and our ancestors You're telling me that their actions are not natural, but they are. They are as important to the forest as the forest is to them. So what's shifted? And the film that I made recently actually explores that a little bit. One of the aspects that I was really interested in is that these ceremonies that we now have that bring us into presence, so we leave behind and we can be in the here and now in order to experience this thing, are perhaps an invitation for us to touch upon that which we always had. Foraging and hunting in their own right are a daily way of being present. You can't go and catch the monkey if you're drifting off in your mind into another time and place. You've got to be in the here and now. Likewise, when you're foraging, you've got to be in the here and now to see where things naturally are. You can't be, it's not like putting things in a row. And I think that the shift to agriculture is a massive part of this turning away from being nature. It's where we saw ourselves as perhaps superior to it because we're now manipulating it. It's where we didn't need to be present because it's all there. We're controlling. And you can be an incredibly present horticulturalist and a loving, connected farmer, and many of us are, but you don't need to be. But you do need to be present when you're a hunter-gatherer. And I think that anyone who's been on a meditation retreat for 10 days, the one thing that you ubiquitously hear when you come out the other side, it's like, oh, at the end of that retreat, I feel more connected, is one of the things that you'll often hear. And I think that we had that as a daily practice once. I live with a group of people in the Amazon who have no future or past tense to their language. So even if they did want to abstract out of the here and now, they have no ability to do it linguistically. They have to be here. And this is a group of people who have a running dialogue with an entity or entities. I wanted to go and meet these people and say, how is it that you experience this dialogue with these forces around you? I mean, I've met lots of other groups that have connection to spirit, but that's normally through drumming or medicine or plants or something. But this group just had a dialogue because they're so present. And I remember speaking to this guy and he said, I hear it in my heart. And then it becomes words. And I think that's why these moments are so important to us. It's like, it's an opportunity for us to slow down and be present and then feel. I can easily explain to anyone we are nature logically. We're an animal, we're nature, but it doesn't mean anything. You've got to feel it for the changes to occur. And I think that's why ceremony is so important, is we need to feel nature once again. We need to feel the empathy of that tree's pain is my pain. I need to feel that I am nature. It's not a thought process. It's an embodied process. And that's why I was really grateful to be here today.
Charlotte, would you like to share what's alive for you around the same question, and maybe something around Avebury and what we've been experiencing today, and then a little bit more general around we are nature?
I just ponder like the fact that we don't think that we're part of nature. I find that really fascinating. Where did that all start? In this like culture of individualization, that we are separate and we're not connected to anything else, and we're just this individual, and that we need one of everything. Where does that stem from? You know, it's a big question. And I feel it just comes from eons of unworked trauma and unworked out grief of different peoples dominating each other. This culture of individualization, I mean, in a very simplistic term, it's we're embodying and expressing symptoms of trauma. You probably all experience trauma to different degrees. But when someone's really traumatized, they don't feel that they're connected to anything else, that they're alone and they don't belong. And they're like very tunneled vision. Repetitive action really helps them, like in the repetitive workforce that we have. And I just feel this individualization is just an expression of deep trauma, feeling that we don't belong to both our blood ancestry and to our earth ancestry, and we don't know how to connect to it anymore. In this survival place, we've lost the ability to really like access our mammalian brains, be in our bodies, be in our five senses, because the world that we brought up into requires us to internal output and consumption and doing. So we don't have to use our five senses. Everything's like given to us on a plate, and we don't need to go out and forage and connect where our food comes from. Just by simply foraging, it can help us connect to our own internal universe, which is actually so connected to nature. So I'm really work with alchemy, like medicine making. The understanding with alchemy is what is within is without, and what is without is within. And it's really just about the study of consciousness embodying into matter and matter moving back to consciousness. That is what alchemy is about. And so just being a human being in this embodied consciousness, it's such a profound thing, and going out foraging is so profound. Each of our five senses is connected to 5 elements of creation. So when we go out and forage and use our senses and connect to our mammalian brains and feel things in our bodies and our gut instincts, our gut ancestral brains are talking to us, we're connecting to the whole universe inside ourselves. So it's a pretty amazing thing being human. Yeah, we just need to get back into feeling that it's okay to feel, connect to our hearts. And the human heart can hold it all, feeling that we're part of nature and that we belong. It's just about surrendering and opening our human heart, because our human heart can hold it all. Nothing can destroy us, whatever traumatic thing comes along. Honestly, the human heart can hold it all. It's part of our feeling, which can get us back into embodiment and feeling like we belong here. And when we feel like we belong to our community, our peoples, the land, we won't trash it. When you feel you belong to something, you're not going to you want to take care of it. And for today, with Avebury, we are nature. I think just connecting with pilgrimage and community is a really profound thing. It can help us to feel like we belong. And it can be very joyful. What we did was really simple, but there's so much beauty and so much nectar, which we can be fed by these, traveling these ancient trackways together and meeting up and having good chats. And we can go away with having created pollen, which will feed us for the days to come, reminding us, we go away with pollen and nectar as the medicine of taking these pilgrimages today. There's such sweetness, isn't it? Thank you. And thank you, Amisha, for holding this all today.
Chris, what would you like to add?
Something such richness and such wisdom and experience, and I don't really have any answers to, are we nature? Of course we're nature, aren't we? Never thought we weren't. So could go along that route of unpicking the etymology, culture, and of course culture and nature, we're divorced from nature because we have a culture. If we didn't have a culture, we would just be fornicating and fighting like many other creatures do, just to exist. I think we are blessed to be slightly more than nature. I think that's a great blessing, actually. I know it's abstracted us, but I think, how do we marry culture and nature together in ways that respect nature, but also adhere the finest points of culture? To have any answers. But I do know that I was lucky enough to be part of a project. I lived in an Iron Age village in Wales, and it was an Iron Age hill fort, and there were 17 of us, and we were living as Iron Age people lived. without any phones, without any glass windows to look at the world, cooking on fires, fetching spring water. And this is 20 years ago now, over 20 years ago now, when we're cooking on the same hearth fires as these ancient British people were cooking on, and the houses were built on the same post holes. And I just had this coming home experience to the elements, and we're always in the weather. It was the wettest autumn on record, and it's quite challenging. But we had enough firewood, and we had each other. I was there kind of as an expert of ancient British religion. I can't remember if the producer or the director. Someone had a dream about me, strapped up in a straitjacket, screaming on this kind of asylum bed, shouting, "I'll never find a playground like this again." And so I think I've been trying to recreate that experience throughout my life since, because it was such a playground. It was such a deep, immersive experience into the elements, and into, like, we had to grind wheat every day just to eat. We had to kill rams and a cow, just to have meat. We had to, if we wanted to drink alcohol, we had to brew apples and honey together just to be able to drink, have a drink in the evening. And we had stories, and we made metal and made charcoal, and I kind of yearn for that, and I kind of yearn to look to the past, to look to the future, and I kind of yearn for climate change and the sky to fall down and the sea to rise, and I want it all to happen now. I want massive cultural collapse today or something, but I want to be able to start my car and get home first. Because I think we're heading for the brick wall. I think as people, our feet are still on the accelerator, and we can see the brick wall, and we're heading for it, and we're kind of thinking about taking our foot off it, and maybe we did, but actually we're still zooming head fast at the brick wall, and we can see it coming. We're going to hit it, and then out of the carnage and the tears before bedtime, then the pieces will be picked up, and we will have to really be nature, or whoever's left after whatever's around the corner. We'll have to, because culture is so alluring, and habit forming, and technology is so alluring and habit forming, and it's got us, and we can't step out of it. I mean, has anyone ever stepped backwards? Even the kind of hippies in the 60s and 70s that tried to do it in communes and self-sufficiency, they couldn't do it. Even John Seymour, who wrote, the book of self-sufficiency, I think it's like village sufficiency that is important. But yeah, slow steps to a certain future, small steps. And the small steps that we can make are important. And so those steps we can make are start to grow more food, start to spend more time in the natural environment, limit the kids' screen time. Economy rules, doesn't it? I guess that's the spanner in the works, is that economy rules. And we're ruled by economy. And money itself is an abstract thing, and we're kind of ruled by economy and money, and we all have our individual bank account, and we all have this individuality, and that's creating... The kids are more interesting than what I'm saying, but they are. I mean, look, there's nature. They're still there. They're still with it. They're still seeing spirits, and they're still enchanted by it all. So it's such a hard task, I think. I mean, not really answering the question about we are nature, but I'm just trying to get to the why we're not nature half the time, But I think it's okay, and I think maybe, and I think the saving grace is just maybe Mother Earth is having her menopause, and just maybe she knows that she one day she will be like Venus, and just perhaps all of this technology and all this rocket fuel is her kind of last effort to try and perpetuate herself and us being her children, like mushroom spores flying off to another planet. But the great irony is we'll probably just irreparably damage this planet trying to get off it. I don't know. I know I would much rather live technology free somehow, but I can't. I'm too much of a coward to do that because I don't know. I mean, because it would feel like a retreat from the world. It would feel like. I mean, I tasted it in that village, and I'm sure you've tasted it in villages all over the world, and perhaps you too, Jimena, and it tastes really good. But to honour the spirit of this time we're surrounded by technology, and so how to use it to get that balance and to be more natural. I don't have the answers, but it's food for thought, and maybe we can do it together.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation.
If we assume that the apocalypse and our human extinction is not going to be this fast burst, but is in fact going to be slow and painful, how do we hold that with the knowledge, the wisdom, and the consciousness that we have around the separation and the trauma? As Bruce was sharing about food and foraging and just that, remembering that we have these supermarkets and they have this trance, and you go in and the lights are a certain way and the music's a certain way, and it kind of puts you into this weird thing, and then you end up with way more things than you can eat and things that you don't even like, and lots of processed things. And it's like, this is the world that we're actually in. And many of us do feel really disconnected. And of course, there's like an idealism of another way. And I guess what I'm curious to explore is, how do we hold that complexity of not being like, okay, let's get rid of the screens and the technology. I mean, I love it. We're able to sit here together, and we have friends all over the world that will be listening to this conversation because of our technology, and we get to connect with each other in some ways that are really quite incredible. And we also get lost in it, and it takes from our energy and it takes from our time. And with all of that complexity of where we are and the trances that we're pulled into, and the economic beings that we're molded into, how do we live the beauty of being human, of being part of this nature? And how do we reclaim some of that sacredness?
As you were speaking, I could feel exactly the simple answer of going inwards and into our nature, and the deep listening that we were discussing earlier this week, and how important that is for us to be rooting and anchoring ourselves within ourselves. It's an old time practice to be sitting in stillness, has huge value, whichever way you do it, organically meditating in different guided ways, or literally sitting in the forest, or sitting on your lawn and feeling the earth. This stillness brings us within, into our nature, into our calm, which I think is super underrated in these times and hugely important for holding everything that's happening. I went through a period in the winter, I'm sure I'm not alone, but just as it was locked down here in England, and where I spent a lot of time with myself, and I did a lot of inner healing work by sitting with myself and listening, doing a regular practice that got me deeper into my own inner nature and the voice that was within me that could be heard more clearly, the more still regularly I became. And within that process was grief, which I know Charlotte mentioning the grief, which I think, as you said, you were saying the disconnect from, the separation we felt and the trauma of this. And I think what's happened is that the grief can be so big that we push it away and we can avoid it. And actually, it's only in my experience by going through it that we can get to the other side, which, if we resist, it will persist. And so the sooner we can strengthen ourselves to feel and be with this grief, and particularly in these times, but parallel our own inner grief, the grief that's in our memory, in our cells, DNA lineage grief, and our grief of this lifetime, and the collective grief of what's happening, what we're losing in this fifth mass extinction, it's called now. Being with that grief is really crucial for our evolution. So being strong, being still, coming into our nature and allowing what needs to be felt to rise and get through is essential. Thank you.
Jimena, wow, thank you for that. I'm so pleased that you entered into that space, because it's exactly what I was feeling too. The group I was telling you about, who are present in the forest, who have this connection through their heart. I also asked them, what is it that this entity, this voice is telling you? And they described to me how it's telling them to not take too much, to be in tune with everything. And then later, they tell me, but we're not listening to it anymore, because we've now started to take the trees down and grow cassava and manioc. And the trees are telling us, please don't chop us down, don't burn us. We're like you, we're human too, we have feelings. And they're literally telling me that this is the message that they're receiving, and yet there they are doing it. And it strikes me that is a grief that we are all carrying as a species now, is that we have somehow blocked out our true understanding of our relationship with the natural world. And if we are, as you said so beautifully, or were able to truly sit with ourselves and what my life is and my impact, as these people who are literally just making that transition, and they're hardly impacting the world at all. And then you think about me. What is my life in relation to this planet and my legacy for the next generation? It's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming that it's almost impossible to be with. It's actually almost intangible to actually really, really touch that. And yet it is there, I believe, within us. It strikes me that we have just been so incredibly successful as a species. We've created everything we've wanted. and we've put aside the feeling, but we've just been so good at creating these extraordinary technologies, these extraordinary things that bring us so much pleasure, and they do. And we've exported over the hill all of the detritus and all of the problems, and we're here just exploring, enjoying it, forgetting all of the real pain and destruction that we are delivering somehow with every step we take, almost. And so, yes, it's no surprise that this is just too much to bear and too much to deal with, and the solutions seem impossible. And yet, the solutions are there. Because when you have the privilege of experiencing life with some of these groups, you realize that actually that so much of what it is that we have is, in a way, I think, is like filling this void that we're feeling. It's actually masking the pain. It's distracting us. And we're able to distract ourselves because no one's holding us to account. We've collectively come into this space where we're just charging. And no one's given us the wisdom for how to slow down, of what it is that we've lost. We've changed our narratives, telling us, you're more of this, more of that. That's what's going to make you happy. And in our deathbeds, we realized it was just not the case. And so we've just collected all of this detritus and all of these inaccurate narratives and all of these methodologies for us to avoid this trauma. And we're just charging with it. But it doesn't take much for that to shift. I mean, that's the weird, extraordinary thing. And it's not about turning back the clock and becoming Luddites and going back into the caves. I mean, some of the shit that we've created is amazing, and it could be possible to carry that forwards. But there's a lot of it that isn't. And we've just got to figure out the best stuff to carry forwards and the best stuff to let go of. But as we've said earlier, we've got to feel into that. And we've got to see ourselves and all that we are doing in the world and make those changes as a result of feeling more empathically connected to each other, more empathically connected to our surroundings. But we also need to believe it's possible. And this is the biggest thing, is a lot of narratives out there that are telling us not only that more is better and all the rest of it, but that actually things are getting better. I mean, just on the BBC the other day, there was a thing by Steven Pinker saying about how, violence was all in the past, and it's just not true. These are narratives that are allowing the super rich to not have to think about their lives. It's just not true. We are not in a great space right now, and we do all need to reevaluate nearly every aspect of ourselves and society. But it doesn't have to be turgid. The future can be beautiful, Amisha. It absolutely can. And when you realize what it is that really nourishes you on the deepest level, it's not the new shit. It's not all the stuff we're buying. It's not all of the new job and the running around, and things like pandemic give us a moment of pause where we can have an insight. It's like, oh, what's actually important to me? And then everyone wants us to get back to business as usual because that's how the cogs turn, because that's how we've created our society, because that's how the rich stay rich and all the rest of it. And the rest are going, all right, I'll get back on the gerbil wheel then. But fuck that shit. It's not what makes us happy. There are other ways of being, but some of them are so far away from our conscious awareness that they're really, really, really hard to figure out. And that's why so many of us feel lost. It's like, okay, we've hit the fucking iceberg. Let's go to the bar. There's nothing we can do. No, there is. There are other ways of being, without wanting to monopolize, that we existed on this planet for 95% of our time with a completely different paradigm, a completely different social order where we understood individual sovereignty and we understood anarchy in a way, and we understood egalitarianism. And in my mind, that story needs to come back. And the other story that needs to come back is, as Jimena was discussing about being present and going inside, people need to know that that journey is worthwhile. I mean, we're a very privileged group of people who've been able to go on that journey because our trauma hasn't necessarily been that bad. I mean, it's been bad, but some people's trauma is really bad. And they will do anything other than go inside. And the type of addictions that are in our society, from the obvious stuff that we see in the news, but the much more dark addictions of power and greed that are ruling the show, we need to have compassion for those people, but we also need to stop that shit, because that's what's going to bring it all to a grinding halt. Everyone needs to know that going on that journey to find that peace, yes, we're going to have to be with what comes up. And we're all carrying so much. But unless people know that it's a worthwhile journey to go on, they're not even going to make that first step. And so we have to change these narratives. We have to let people realize that, yeah, there is a tribe out there that I haven't visited yet, but they see any form of violence as a type of mental illness. It's like people go, no, we've always been aggressive. We've always been patriarchal. It's just not true. Human societies can be amazing, and they have been, and I've touched them. I've been with them, and I'm not a romantic. I've seen shit stuff in lots of tribal groups. I say that with love. Didn't sound like I said it with love, but yeah, I am not a hopeless romantic for all indigenous peoples. I'm not. I've seen some really, really dark stuff, but I've also seen amazing stuff that we can learn about. And we need to know that and have it and bring it into our lives and shift everything so that we can find that again. And then, oh my God, we could have just the most sublime existence together. It is possible. It's not too late. Yes, there'll be collateral damage. Yes, there'll be pain. But the future.
Go on, Bruce.
It's beautiful.
Before we go any deeper, and we could go into questions for the panel, and everyone that is sat here is amazing, and you can listen to them each in more detail in their podcasts that we've shared. I wanted to invite anyone here who is sat here that wants to share what's stirring for them around this theme, to come up and say a few words. Would anyone like to take that invitation?
So I'm thinking a lot about the reintroduction of ritual to younger people in our society, because as you said, it could actually possibly be very easy to make our society really beautiful again. And so I'm thinking a lot about the lack of ritual youth have in our society nowadays. There's no one to introduce them into the right way of being, and there's also no elders to bring them back into the village once they've gone on their sort of hero's journey. I guess what I'm wondering is like maybe how, I mean that's such a massive question, or what you think about the sort of lack of ritual in our society, or if we still do have rituals, or if it's through technology and social media we can use that to sort of give people that experience again.
What's your name?
I'm Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy. You know, I found a photograph of myself as a teenage girl wearing a Playboy bunny t-shirt with like really dark eyes. And I just thought, God, like, why the fuck was I doing that? And like, why was that okay for a teenage girl to be like adorning with this symbol of like patriarchy and abuse and hardcore sex? Yeah.
Teenagers hit the age where they have to go through a rite of passage. They have to prove themselves. They have to go out into the world. They have to, you know, it's a form of hunting or being the sort of man or the woman of the tribe. And so, you know, they need to do that, and they will always do that. And if there's no one to guide them through doing that, they lose themselves, and then we get ourselves into this situation in this universe with addictions and lost people and things like that. So that's kind of been my main thought whilst you guys have been talking, is about how to reintroduce ritualism into what is actually a global network, really. We don't have little tribes anymore or anything like that. We are completely connected through technology. So whatever the main voice of Netflix or whatever is the main sort of thing that's guiding people, you know, it's like the Tower of Babel. There's no different thing, you know, there's not tiny little tribes anymore growing in different ways and then influencing each other. You know, as a whole universe, we're all becoming the same, and that's actually really dangerous, I think.
Thank you, and so sorry for swearing in the presence of children. If there, whilst I'm here in the circle, can I entice anyone else to share something? And can you share your name as well?
Tom, but like literally everything Lucy just said was what I wanted to ask. I don't know if you've ever met a 15-year-old TikToker. Like, I mean, everything that you said today, like, I agree with. Like, it's incredible. But the whole world of sort of Instagram and this narcissistic world of just likes and I want this, and it's just this quick fix of like. And yeah, like I said, I agree with everything you said, and I believe that the world is a beautiful place, but not necessarily at the moment. Like, yeah, you've all found peace and how you think the world should be, but it's not necessarily how it is. And that's a dream. And how do we get this next generation of people to think like you? Like, how do you do that? How do you go from a quick fix on Instagram, I got 50 likes, to like, oh my God, I love the bird songs. Like, I want to go and walk in nature. I want to feel the earth beneath my feet. And that's my major question to you, is like, how do we do that?
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, never before has a species documented achieving so little so diligently through the powers of TikTok and such like really great archives we're leaving there for the future. Anyone else from the circle want to bring your voice in? Naomi, come over.
I just wanted to kind of, from that share there, go back to what Bruce said about how anybody that's not on the path of kind of just healing and trying to make the world a better place is like in a state of trauma, and you know, they haven't got to a place where they feel safe to go inwards yet. And I feel like those of us that are privileged to be on that path and to be experiencing a sense of happiness in our life and like freedom from constant state of trauma that a lot of these people are in, if we keep going and doing what we naturally will do, which I believe is unite, co-live, enjoy the simplicity and beauty of life together in our natural state, then I believe those people will sort of turn around and be inspired and start just following slowly. And intuition is the word that comes to me, but yeah.
A lot of people aren't in trauma. Like, trauma is actually a very precious thing when you understand you have it, because it wakes you up. But like, I think a huge part of our society aren't in trauma. They're very comfortable.
And anything else from the circle before we go back up to the panel? Julia.
I guess it's kind of a question. I mean, the pandemic was mentioned, right, as a moment that has absolutely been rife with, like, tragedy and grief, but that I also, and I can only speak really from my own personal experience or some collected anecdotes from people whose lives have completely shifted, who have decided to shift their lives, and the pandemic has actually offered them an opportunity in a way to do so. And it strikes me that it's one of the first times in human history in which we've had this level of collective grief and this level of collective trauma, but also just collective experience. Like, everybody's on a certain baseline level that has never really happened before on a global way. And so if we choose to see that as a kind of an opportunity, again, without negating all the awful things that have come from it, how do we leverage that, right? How do you make the most of the fact that actually people's lives have shifted and their experiences have shifted, and perhaps the way in which they saw their life playing out has had to change, and how can we actually make the most of the fact that we've had a collective experience of some kind that has never really happened before?
I was just wondering what you meant by the collective experience, or that we've never had such a collective experience. Do you mean because we are now universally, collectively united, and we can talk to anyone in the whole entire world. Because like the Black Plague happened, I mean, I think the world's been a pretty shit place before, and like every time in history has had their sort of collective awfulness.
I guess I mean in the sense that for the first time we've also had access to other people's same experience, if that makes sense. So the fact that we have technology that allows us to understand that people in China are experiencing something similar, not the exact same thing, of course, every experience is individual, but the fact that we have access to the fact that other people are experiencing the same type of thing, there seems to be a kind of a collective understanding in that as well, right? Perhaps a collective empathy.
All I can say is in my own experience, I went from being a Playboy bunny t-shirt wearing teenager. And of course, that was just one element of the behavior, to going on a very deep healing journey and realizing levels of trauma that weren't visible on the surface, but did mean that I was continually putting myself into unsafe situations, just being cool, wild, normal, fun, you know, doing what my peers were doing. But actually in a healing process, realizing, wait, what? That's not what's sacred or what being a human is about. That didn't feel right in my body, and all of that kind of thing. And I feel like many people go through that journey when I work with people with addictions and that are healing. Jimena, this is such a big thing for you with young people, because raising your three has been such beautiful work. What would you like to share around this?
Yeah, my son, from the age of 13, he was demanding some form of ritual that could help him through. And I couldn't find anything for him. And then I think when he was around 16, 17, I spoke to Bruce, actually, and was looking for a man I'd heard of in Dartmoor. Somehow this didn't work, and then he became the age where anything I would bring to him was not going to happen. And he went on his path, and just only recently at age 22 found a man initiation experience, which you can't tell anyone about, but these really burly blokes put through this group of men. He came back, my son, who's my youngest, he came back saying, how do we not have this in our society? This is mental, like that we have to get through this club in London, Fabric. That's it. Yeah. And all of that malarkey. And like kind of the blind leading the blind as teenagers, trying to like, you know, all that wild energy that's no longer used, foraging and hunting and doing all that, and just throwing it all over the place, not knowing where to put it. So yeah, so this was very, very important to him. I mean, when I hear you speaking, I remember what Bruce said as well. We are quite a privileged group of people. What do we do with the inner city children and young people who have this nature deficit thing I'd never heard of, who don't have access to nature very easily and to these kind of things? I don't have the answer to that either. I really feel for them. And I know there's a lot of people moving out of London and with the pandemic, refiguring out their lives and making these shifts. Those are the very privileged who can do that. But a memory came up that I'm just going to share now that's also connected to the deeper intelligences of nature, teacher plants, and the wisdom they bring, the connection to our essence, and in these lands, particularly mushrooms and what are they called? The ones, the liberty caps. When I came to live here 20-something years ago, I was astounded. It was, you know, sold in everywhere. I went to Camden, you know, tourist, and I was like, wow, check these people out. This is amazing. This is so fantastic. Of course, that was prohibited and shut down. I think the shift in my three youngsters who are now young adults definitely was that chemical drug experience being shifted to the natural plant worlds and what the plants was telling them. That's been a big, expansive and grounding experience for them. Yeah, I wanted to share that. And then solution, I found myself, this is the memory, I found myself once in an event in a cathedral in London, and a cathedral, a church in London. And basically it was a Christian-led youth movement event. And as I went around looking, I looked around, there was a big patchwork tapestry, and it had different words and and some together: hope, faith, have this, do that, go out more, da, 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 da. This is inside this big church, and it was huge, and it was on the side. And I looked at it, and all of a sudden I read in a corner, this patchwork under glass and frame put MDMA in the water, in between all these different things on this tapestry in this church. And I was like, is it me? Am I seeing this? I took a photo. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And all these, very, very radical Christian people, totally oblivious. And I thought, well, that could be a good thing to do, because this empathy situation is partially, not partially, it's a huge issue, for people who are governing the 3 countries I'm very connected to. Brazil, the US now has shifted. And here, lack of empathy is what brings people to do the things they do and sleep at night, which I can't understand. So there's my tuppence on bringing that awareness and that connection to their hearts.
I'd just like to add that the Future is Beautiful does not endorse putting anything in any water and is not responsible for any actions you take. Charlotte.
So in answer to your question about bringing ritual to the youth, especially during transitioning into that period of puberty especially, so it's just kind of good to understand what is going on inside these youngsters. And during puberty, very profound change going on. When the body changes to be able to be part of creation and create life, okay? An immense amount of hormones are going on inside the body, and the brain starts to actually go through a physical change. What I can see with youngsters is this immense power that they're starting to feel they're part. It can create new life, and that they need to feel connected to something which is greater than them, outside themselves, and to have that holding and that support, and greater than their own family network, their mother and dad, of a greater universal mother and father. So it's good to start from that point of just understanding that, and how can that holding be facilitated in holding what can be a universal mother and father. So obviously in the UK, it's a big issue about, connecting back to our land and our heritage, and reconnecting back to the threads. Otherwise what happens invariably, borrow from other cultures who have those maps of connection and reconnection back. So that's been going on for some time. And I think right now what is really going on, that people are wanting to connect back to the maps from this lands. We can do that in our own way. We can. It's as simple as getting curious, and just even with the deep wisdom keepers of this land in the trees, for example. So I work really closely with the yew tree, and that is my grandmother and my grandfather. They are the trees of eternity. It's through the natural world that we can receive that holding. For example, the yew tree, its blueprint, it has the capacity to grow forever if the environment was to be untampered with, and humans not to, mess around with these trees. So for me, I love introducing youngsters to the yew, to go and feel connected to that eternity, which is actually what they're seeking for, to connect to the eternal forces which are raging inside them right now, and to know that they are part of the eternal. They are part of something so much more greater than themselves. So we can do that through the natural world, and just asking questions and being curious, There's not going to be a right way to do it, because we are right now creating the way in helping reconnect back to our land and our heritage. There's not a perfect way, but the way lives within our hearts, okay? And just getting curious and asking the questions and opening up our 5 senses, opening up our brain and our gut in our brain and our heart and our mammalian brain, our feeling brain, and our hearts will guide us. It's to do with belonging. So we can feel like belonging to our earth, okay? So I'm talking from that level, but then we need to feel like belonging to our blood as well. A lot of people have that about their heritage, of where they come from. So it's the two together, often, which people need to have that pathway. It's like both ancestry, our blood ancestry and our earth ancestry.
So we're going to have to pull this conversation to a close. I'm going to invite each of our guests to share just a couple, like a sentence or two as a closing. And one thing that's struck me from what's been shared in the last sort of 15, 20 minutes is I was talking to some friends that were on the pilgrimage earlier and that have left, and they have teenagers. Their daughter has created this beautiful art project, and it's all been based around ritual and cycles. And this question around, like, what's my tribe, was the question that had come to her through her art. And that she had realized that she had been exposed to so much ritual and so many amazing teachings through her parents, who would honor and celebrate the moon cycles, that would teach her how we work with the moon, how we work with the turnings of the seasons, and would actually bring living in tune with nature into their lives. And so it wasn't such an alien concept. And I feel that that's something that all of us can do. And the more that we do it, the more that we talk about it, then the more normal that can become in our culture, because it has been normal in human cultures all over the world forever. The moon has always been a point that gives you some sense of direction and something that you can kind of work with in your own life and the inner tides. And so I feel like that reconnecting to our cycles, and that's something that all of us can do, no matter what our background is, and all the cultures have it. A lot of the calendars, for example, will relate to the moon in every culture. And so it's making that normal again, that for me is a big part of, then it brings in all the little rituals, and then all these rites of passages then begin to be more clearly longed for, or there's that inspiration to create a ritual around something that you need. I'm personally about to create a ritual around something that I feel that's missing, that's not in this culture, that's not in this society. And as soon as I realized I didn't have it and I needed it, I've started to like, oh, okay, who do I need to bring to that? How do we need to do it? And that's the kind of the inspiration, the creativity that we want to invite in as humans that are part of this nature. I'm going to pass to each of our lovely guests to share.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind ourselves that we're all born, wherever we are born, as pure little love beings full of joy, and to remember that as our true nature, but also that we've come in our paths and different experiences and traumas and etc. that come on top of that and obscure, to flip it. And as I was saying before, this going through the grief, being like a key and a portal, also loving each part of ourselves, and even loving and giving love towards those who are in those spaces of power and greed and etc., etc. This is, I feel, quite an important part of us moving forward, is coming back into our hearts to love each part of ourselves and to love each part of what is happening, and send that love out in any way you can, and literally between us be more loving, more than ever, and collective prayers of sending love to different people in power, or the different things that are happening, and awakening that in the deepest way that we've ever have in all of our time, in all of our history. That's my dream, that's my hope, and yeah, I look forward to sharing a bit of more love with everyone here in the purest form. And yeah, just thank you very much to all of you for your presences, everyone here. Yeah, blessings.
I just like to say that as a parent as well, kids model our behaviour, and if we're always on our phone, they'll be always on their phone, and if we feel like there's a lack of ritual in our children's lives, and there's probably a lack of ritual in our lives, and we can do it. There are the moon cycles, there are solar cycles. I'm going to extol the virtues of the Druidic tradition because that's really helped me in my life. And I was a young man and a bit spiritual and a bit sort of away with the fairies, and I discovered Druidry, and it kind of really put my feet on the ground and gave me this framework within which to explore and deepen and immerse myself into a spiritual practice that's keyed to the natural rhythms and the festivals that come up every 6 weeks that you just celebrate. And kids really get ceremony, and so do teenagers actually, and they can do. And it's just about doing it with presence and doing it with a real depth and authenticness, and then that's kind of contagious. Even for the really little ones, they suddenly can be stilled and sort of can get the spirit of the circle. When you stood in circle. I want to talk about a band of brothers. If anyone's heard of that, a friend of mine is helping them a lot, and is like a member of staff now, and that's quite good for men and young men. And there are many groups like that around as well that have, so this question has been answered from many different angles by many different groups. In recent history, I don't think we've had a lack of rites of passage. And I'm thinking of, like Berry Hill Football Club, rugby club, and how all the disenchanted young men of the Forest of Dean, can kind of gravitate towards that rugby club, and they can have this sense of community there. And I'm thinking of, working men's clubs, and I'm thinking of like silly pranks that a young apprentice would get played on by the older guys in the particular trade. All these kind of things were and are and have been there for us, and these rites of passage have been there in our lives, but not necessarily so overtly spiritual or mystical. They've just been a prank. They've become a prank. They've become like an initiation ceremony and a bit of a challenge and a bit of a laugh. But once one has gone through that into whatever trade, then there has been a sense of belonging and honouring the ancestors of your own blood, honouring the ancestors of place, learning about these trees and their lore, those plants over there, the taste of that one, why you can't eat that one, the minerals beneath your feet, the stars above, and all the stories of one's native culture give us a great sense of belonging, great sense of identity, great sense of place, and that gives us a sense of well-being, combined with the ritual and the great food that one might cook. And I don't know who said it, but think globally, act locally. Who said that? I don't know. It's great. And I think it really speaks to the spirit of this time, because we have this World Wide Web, and we can be in touch with, we can have this great world view and world connectedness. But to just try and source as much locally as possible. I think when we started to outsource things, that again started to disconnect us. Our clothing we've outsourced, our entertainments we've outsourced, our religions we've outsourced, our food. Let's come home.
So to close, like in our Western culture, a friend recently said to me, the Western culture literally is just terrified of moving towards pain. It's like literal, just terrified of moving towards it, like stuff that is tough, or like just that one's internal pain. But literally, we all know when we touch into that pain, immense amount of healing and release is just on the other side. So just get really curious. Anything like which comes up, which is triggering or really difficult, just get curious about meeting it instead of like reacting to it. Just go and meet it. And the more and more and more we do that, then it helps us, a profound rewiring of just becoming embodied, coming into our hearts. And we don't see things as black and white, right or wrong. That pain's wrong. Actually, it becomes this like deep curiosity and fascination of, wow, what is this jewel here for me to reclaim? What is this gold? What is like profundity in what has been shown to me? And in this Western culture, I mean, this is embodied throughout the fabric of everything, this terror of moving towards pain, especially in allopathic medicine, which is a reductionist viewpoint of looking at the body in symptoms. The pharmaceuticals which are given to us are to suppress and control the symptoms. And so they're brilliant for life and death and surgery. Brilliant. We need that, definitely. But like everyday pain, you know, people are like taking painkillers and they're not giving their bodies the capacity to question, why am I feeling that? And blocking the ability for the unconscious mind to show them the root cause of what's going on and the mystery of the unconscious mind rising up and expressing something very profound. So when we meet our pain, we are meeting our bodies, we are embodying. So that's just what I want to leave you with. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really nice, Charlotte. We're not very good at meeting our pain. It's something that I mentioned earlier, is that we've been very good at creating exactly the type of society that we want. And we're slowly waking up to the fact that it might not be a society that's very good for us. It's like we're in the sweetie shop and we're gorging ourselves. And some people have the privilege of waking up to that, and others are getting diabetes and others are getting fat. And like we're all in this state of unhealth. And some are escaping, and there's plenty in there. And how are we going to persuade everyone to get out of this shop because there's something more wholesome on the other side? Well, we know how hard that is. We see friends of ours who are not healthy and we say, come for a run, and they just won't. It's like we all got to find our own way with that. And the generations that are in youth today are going to struggle because there's so much that's trying to grab their attention. And it's so alluring, and it's incredibly hard for us to be able to advise them, inform them, inspire them that there's something more wholesome on the other side. And for many of us, it's lovely to see my friend George Barker just walk in today. I haven't seen for a while. But like for many of us, including myself, we need to actually collapse and reach rock bottom and have a loving friend to reach out a hand and say, like George did to me, mate, come and learn how to meditate. You are in trouble. You know, get out of the bloody sweetie shop. And so for many of us, that will be what will happen, is that we will have a helping hand. But for many others, depending on what's going to happen, they might be in the sweetie shop when the tsunami hits us. You know, we if we don't all figure this out, we are, as Chris said, heading towards the brick wall. And so we need to all, this is a time of work. We've got to be getting out of our bubbles and going into these other phases of places of our society and holding out a hand and being the inspiration and offering this advice in a way that makes sense to them in a language that they understand. And that's hard in the family, and it's also hard out there, but we need to be doing that. That is our work now. It's not good enough sitting around with your friends in your bubble saying how great things are and aren't we great because we've done our healing. Unless we can get out into the world and lend a hand to others, we're all in this together. And if it comes down, it comes down with all of us. The narratives, as I mentioned earlier, are at the heart of it for me. And there are one or two really fascinating things that I've learned in recent years that can be helpful. And one is that there is this beautiful thing on the other side that I talked about earlier that we can achieve. Another is that we have had revolutions before that have gone through phases like this. The one that I'm really interested in, that I haven't got time to go into because we're closing, but it is the first revolution ever that we had as a species, where we came from aggressive apex alpha male society of the apes that we were before we became human into societies of men and women living together in relative harmony. And the biggest aspect of that, and the biggest aspect of how we were on this planet right up until agriculture, I believe, was the strength of women in solidarity together in our societies, having an equal voice in society at every level of society, but not acting as the masculine, acting in their own way from their own power, not trying to be like the guys, because in our societies, the guys have the power. So the only way to be powerful is to be like that. When you truly have the privilege of living with an egalitarian society, you understand what equality is. And in those societies, equality is the women being women, but as powerful or even maybe more powerful than the men, holding their own wisdom. And that, I see elements of that coming back. And I, as a guy, and I apologize if anything that I'm saying, I'm getting the words wrong, because this is a complex subject, I know, but I have deep hope that can come back, and that we as guys can recognize that and wish for it back and honor it and want it back. Because without that, with the way things are now and the way we've been running the show, there's no hope. I kind of wish I hadn't gone there in a way, because it's so fragile, and I get so sensitive about how to express that, because I know it's difficult. And so I apologize again if I got it wrong, but I hope you can see there's something in that makes sense. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you to Jimena. Did you want to say? You do. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to leave everyone with the imagery of how the Kogi people, which Bruce has worked with quite a lot, how they view themselves as nature. They wear, the mamas wear white hats that are tight on their head. And this for them represents the snow-capped mountains, and their hair represents the mountains. And their blood that runs through the body is the rivers, the waters. Their bones are the stones, the rocks, the minerals. And so when we go inside and we are in our stillness, we are actually listening to the earth. We are listening to the waters. We are listening to the cosmos. So to remember this in your deep listening.
Thank you to each of our beautiful guests and to everyone that's here present and that will listen to this conversation, and really just to presence that question that we can always be asking ourselves, how can I connect deeper to myself, to that true self that lives inside, and how can I connect deeper to the other people around me, in whether that's reaching out to your friends or whether that's reaching out to other parts of the areas that you live in, and sharing knowledge and wisdom, and how can I connect deeper to this earth.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question: how will you create beauty in the world?